Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we plunge headfirst into fascinating ideas, pulling out the core insights to get you well-informed quickly. For decades, maybe even centuries, our scientific understanding of life has largely settled on this foundational idea. Life is an incredibly intricate emergent property of complex biochemistry. Get the right atoms, the right conditions, the right chemical reactions, and poof, life emerges. It makes intuitive sense, right? We see the stunning complexity of a single cell, the intricate dance of molecules, and our minds just naturally conclude that life is the ultimate expression of material organization.
Oh, absolutely. It's the dominant paradigm for a very good reason. This view has propelled incredible discoveries in genetics, medicine, our understanding of biological processes. We've built an entire scientific enterprise around it, really dissecting the how of life at ever finer scales.
And it's been tremendously successful for what it aims to explain, definitely. But what if that foundational view, as robust and elegant as it seems, is actually looking at the entire equation from, well, an incomplete perspective? What if life isn't merely the end of matter's journey into complexity, but something far more fundamental, something ontologically embedded in the very structure of space itself? This is where, for me, things start to get truly mind-bending.
It absolutely is. Today, our deep dive unpacks a really groundbreaking ontological framework. It's from a paper by Philip Lillian titled The Embedding of Life in the FCHP NFN Framework, Life as Stabilized Coherence in Hyperfractal Phase Space. And it's a radical departure from conventional thinking, suggesting a universe that doesn't just host life, but is life, in a way, in its most fundamental expression.
Lillian's paper basically throws down a gauntlet with its core assertion. Life is not the end of matter, but the beginning of coherence intelligence. Just pause and think about that for a moment.
Yeah.
This framework posits that life isn't some incidental outcome, a happy accident of chemistry in a passive universe. Instead, it suggests life is not only built into the universe from the ground up, but that reality itself has an inherent drive towards increasing coherence and organization. And life is a primary manifestation of that drive. It's a profound shift, really, from a material-centric view to a coherent-centric one. It challenges us to consider not just how life operates, but why it emerges, and its fundamental relationship with the very fabric of reality.
And this framework, it seeks to offer a truly comprehensive, detailed presentation of this alternative view. It lays it all out.
So what are we going to explore in this journey today? We're going to fundamentally redefine space as we know it, introduce these novel quantization systems that describe the universe's inherent organizing principles. We'll uncover the role of directional gradients in shaping reality, and maybe most uniquely, we're going to walk through a series of these visual scrolls. And these aren't just illustrative pictures. They're designed as symbolic narratives, almost like ancient codices, meant to make these incredibly abstract concepts tangible, resonant, and maybe even, dare I say, almost intuitive. Our mission, as always, is to give you those aha moments, connecting seemingly disparate ideas so you gain knowledge quickly but thoroughly without feeling overwhelmed. It's about seeing the universe and our place in it through a completely different lens.
Exactly. A lens that sees order and direction not as external forces imposed on things, but as intrinsic properties of existence itself.
All right, let's unpack this revolutionary perspective. Let's dive in. Okay, so we're starting by directly challenging that conventional view of life we just touched on. Modern science, particularly biology, has made incredible strides by viewing life primarily as biochemical complexity. We map genomes, understand metabolic pathways, delve into molecular interactions with astonishing precision. And for understanding many of the mechanisms of life, it's a phenomenal approach, no question.
Absolutely. The how of cellular respiration or DNA replication is exquisitely detailed. We know so much. However, as Lillian points out, this perspective often struggles to fully account for certain inherent, almost predetermined characteristics of life. For instance, its structured coherence, how systems maintain their integrity against entropy, against falling apart. Its persistent directionality, why evolution seems to move towards increasing complexity in specific forms, not just randomly. And its inherent irreversibility, why certain processes in life are one-way streets, or, crucially, why specific chiralities, the handedness of molecules, are overwhelmingly preferred in living systems.
That's a great point. Why do L-amino acids dominate life on Earth? Or why does DNA form a right-handed helix? Always. If it's all just random biochemical complexity that happened to work out, it feels like there's an underlying blueprint, maybe a cosmic bias, driving these specific outcomes. And that's precisely where Lillian's new ontology comes in, rooted in this FCHP NFN framework. It proposes that space is not a passive backdrop. It's not just an empty stage for matter to dance on. Instead, space itself is an active, organizing field.
That's the crux of it, really. In this framework, space is defined as a coherence active manifold, meaning it's inherently encoded with things like fractal recursion, gradient torsion, and chirality. It's not just a void, it's an active participant, a driving force in the emergence of complexity, rather than some kind of neutral observer. This challenges the very notion of what space is.
Okay, so let's dive into that first colossal concept, unpacking the Finsler coherence hyperfractal phase space, or FCHP. This sounds incredibly dense, I admit, but let's chew on its components one by one. What exactly is FCHP at its core?
Okay, at its most fundamental level, FCHP is described as a direction-sensitive, anisotropic, recursively structured phase space where geometry, energy, and coherence are fundamentally unified. And what's truly fascinating here is that it's not merely being presented as a theoretical mathematical construct, it's being put forward as the very fabric of reality, the foundational substrate from which everything, including life, emerges.
Okay, direction-sensitive, anisotropic, recursively structured phase space. Let's really unpack those. What does Finslerian mean in this context? You said direction-dependent.
Right. Finslerian geometry, unlike standard Riemannian geometry where, distance or movement cost is uniform in all directions, here it means that the cost or effort of navigating this space depends on your direction of travel. Think of it maybe like walking on a complex terrain. Going uphill is harder than downhill, and cross-country might be harder than sticking to a path. But here, the terrain is determined by the flow of coherence. So the geometry itself kind of bends and shifts based on the direction you're moving in terms of coherence flow. This makes some pathways of organization more preferred or easier than others. It's sensitive to anisotropic coherence flows, meaning the organizing energy doesn't just spread out evenly like ripples on a pond. It has preferred pathways, almost like water flowing through a landscape with hills and valleys rather than on a perfectly flat plane. This fundamentally changes how we might approach concepts like causality and emergence.
That's a radical departure from our usual picture of space as uniformly pliable everywhere.
Yeah.
Okay, and hyperfractal. We're familiar with fractals like coastlines or snowflakes, where patterns repeat at different scales. But applying it to coherence itself, what does that imply?
Hyperfractal means it's structured through recursive, self-similar coherence scales. Imagine those beautiful, infinitely repeating fractal patterns you see in nature. But instead of physical shapes, you're observing the same fundamental organizational patterns and coherence relationships repeating at different magnifications. But it's applied to coherence itself. So a coherent structure at the quantum level might echo a coherent structure at the cellular level, and that same pattern might repeat at the planetary or even cosmic level. It suggests that the universe has an intrinsic, self-similar organizing principle at work across all scales.
Wow.
This means understanding coherence in a cell could, in theory, inform our understanding of galactic formation, maybe not by accident, but by the design of the underlying space.
Okay, that's huge. And then phase space. This term usually refers to a space embedding both position and momentum, right? Used in classical physics to describe the complete state of a system. But here it's generalized. How so?
Precisely. It's generalized from just the physical state to encompass coherence fields and gradient curvature potentials. So it's not just about where something is physically and where it's going. It's fundamentally about its inherent coherent state, its potential for organization, and the inherent bends or curvatures in its coherence field that dictate how coherence will flow and coalesce. Think of it not just as a map of where things are physically, but a map of where they are organizationally, how much order they have, and where they're trying to go in terms of increasing order, so to speak. It's a unified space where the state of coherence is as fundamental as physical location and movement.
So if FCHP encompasses all of these properties, direction dependence, fractal organization of coherence, and this generalized phase space, what are the profound implications? It sounds like it's far more than just geometry.
It is, absolutely. Lillian posits that FCHP is not just geometry, it's a resonant ontology. This means it's a coherence-modulated substrate from which things like dimensionality, time, and organization actually emerge. It fundamentally changes how we might approach unsolved problems in physics or maybe even the search for alien life. If space itself has this inherent drive towards certain coherent formations, it makes life seem less like a rare accidental occurrence and more like Well, a cosmic imperative.
A cosmic imperative. Wow.
It raises an important question for us. What if reality isn't just a collection of particles governed by external laws, but is inherently active, inherently organizing, and maybe inherently biased towards certain coherent formations? It's like the universe has an intrinsic, dynamic drive to organize itself, and FCHP is that drive.
That's truly a mind-bending shift. It suggests the universe isn't a static stage, but a dynamic self-organizing process. Okay, so if space itself is this active field, how do we measure or describe its coherent structure? We need a way to quantify this inherent organization. And that brings us to the Noetherian Finsler Numbers, or NFN.
Indeed. If FCHP is the active field, NFN is the quantization system for it. It's presented as a four-tuple quantization unit, meaning it has four distinct components or axes. Each NFN four-tuple is described as a quantum of directed coherence geometry, acting as both a logical operand in computation and a structural seed in morphogenesis.
So these aren't just numbers in the traditional sense. They're like fundamental directive building blocks of coherent structure. They don't just describe coherence, they actively instantiate it. Let's break down those four axes. The first is N1N1, or gradient directionality. What's that about?
N1N1 encodes the orientation of coherence flow. You can think of it like a compass for coherence, really. It tells you precisely which way the organizing principle or the flow of inherent order is pointing in a given region of FCHP. Visually, as we'll explore later with the scrolls, it's depicted as a directional vector with embedded waveforms, encoding the flow orientation and maybe the gradient steepness. It's the initial push in a specific direction.
Okay, the direction. Then there's N2N2, topological invariance. This one sounds quite abstract. What does quantized Noether charge mean for our understanding of coherence?
Right. N2N2 refers to a quantized Noether charge which conserves field symmetries. To briefly explain Noether's theorem, it's a fundamental principle in physics connecting conservation laws like conservation of energy, momentum, or angular momentum to underlying symmetries in a system. For example, conservation of energy is linked to time symmetry. If the laws of physics don't change over time, energy is conserved. Here, N2N2 preserves these fundamental symmetries within the coherence field. Essentially, NFN ensures that the fundamental patterns of organization in the universe don't just randomly disappear, they're conserved. Much like energy isn't lost but transforms. It ensures that even as coherence flows and changes, fundamental properties of organized structures are maintained. It's visually depicted as a toroidal loop, preserving symmetry across transformations, representing conserved quantities. It's about stability and preservation of inherent properties within this dynamic coherence.
That's a crucial point, ensuring stability amidst dynamic flow. Makes sense. What about N3N3, spin torsion coupling? This sounds like where the twist and handedness of reality become inherent properties.
It is, precisely. N3N3 describes field curvature localized into geometric spirals. This is absolutely crucial for understanding the consistent handedness we observe in reality, particularly in life. Think about why DNA is always a right-handed double helix, or why certain molecules preferentially exist as one mirror image over another chirality. These aren't accidental occurrences in this framework. It's a fundamental aspect of how coherence organizes itself, creating intrinsic twists and handedness. It's depicted visually as a spiral vector emerging from a double helix, encoding chirality, torsion, and helical phase direction. This axis literally builds the twist into the fabric of emergent forms.
So it makes a twist happen, it doesn't just describe it. Okay, and finally N4N44, negentropic potential. We've heard of entropy, the universal tendency towards disorder and chaos. Negentropy is the opposite, tendency towards order. How does NFN quantify that?
Exactly. N4N4 is a direct measure of coherence retention or dissipation resistance. It quantifies how well a coherent structure can maintain its organization against the forces of dissolution, against entropy. It's the inherent ability of a system to build and sustain order, to defy the usual pull towards chaos. This axis quantifies how effectively a coherent structure can resist disorder and maintain its complex organization. It's shown visually as a capsule-like shape with internal wave harmonic stabilization, representing resistance to decoherence and its potential to attract and maintain even greater coherence.
So each NFN4 tuple is a quantum of directed coherence geometry, acting as both a logical operand in computation and a structural seed in morphogenesis. What does that mean in practical terms, this idea of logical operand? Does this imply the universe is like computing itself, or that our own computers are tapping into these fundamental structures somehow?
That's an excellent question, and it really gets to the heart of Lillian's radical proposition. When it says logical operand in computation, it suggests that these NFN units are not just passive descriptors. They are active participants in the universe's inherent self-organization and processing. Imagine them as the fundamental bits or qubits of cosmic information, if you will. They don't just exist, they operate. This implies that the universe isn't merely subject to laws, it's actively processing and structuring reality based on these NFN values. And as structural seeds in morphogenesis, it means these NFN units are the quantized templates, the pre-programmed blueprints that scaffold life's self-assembly. They direct the precise forms and functions of everything from a single protein molecule to an entire complex organism. They ensure that organized structures like cells or DNA can emerge and persist, almost as if life is a computation performed by the universe itself, where NFNs are the fundamental code.
Wow, okay. Life as cosmic computation. With FCHP as the space and NFN as the quanta that describe and direct its coherence, we need a dynamic operator, right? A driving force. Enter the coherence directional gradient, or CDG. Lillian describes it as the primary organizing operator, life's architectural compass. How does it operate? How does it actually do this organizing?
CDG is presented as the key dynamic for emergence within FCHP. It's the active principle that translates the potential encoded in FCHP and NFNs into physical reality. Think of it as the universe's own 3D printer, maybe, but one that prints order and form directly from coherence potential.
Okay, so it's the engine that drives organization. First, it encodes chirality. We talked about handedness. What does CDG do there specifically?
It establishes asymmetry. And this is absolutely essential for biochemical organization, and in fact, the very existence of life as we know it. Consider amino acids, the building blocks of all proteins in living organisms, or the helical structure of DNA, always right-handed. Here's where it gets really interesting. In this framework, the handedness of molecules isn't accidental. It's not a statistical preference from random biochemical processes. It's actively directed and selected by this fundamental CDG. CDG acts as a field template, literally generating and enforcing that asymmetry, imprinting the specific handedness onto emerging structures. So every instance of handedness we see in nature, from DNA to snail shells, is literally a manifestation of this cosmic compass.
How does that shake up our understanding of evolution, where we often attribute these preferences to chance or selection advantage after they arise?
It radically shifts it, doesn't it? From post-hoc selection to a kind of pre-programmed directive and inherent bias in the field itself.
Okay, and it generates torsional spin flows. What does that mean?
Yes, it localizes coherence into spiral vectors. This is crucial for biological scaffolding, providing the rotational forces that help structure things like microtubules within cells, those tiny, hollow cylinders that act as the cell's internal skeleton and transport system. It's described as a torsional engine, actively producing those rotational coherence flows that are vital for complex biological architecture. It provides the twist that allows for helical and spiral forms to emerge and stabilize.
It also introduces irreversible directionality, laying down the arrow of time. This is a big one. Time is something we experience as fundamental, always moving forward. How does CDG relate to that?
This suggests that time isn't just a separate external dimension that simply exists. Instead, the arrow of time, the inherent directionality we experience from past to future, actually emerges from gradient descent in coherence fields. CDG embeds this directionality into morphogenesis and evolution, giving rise to an irreversible flow of events. It implies that time is not just a dimension we move through, but a process reflecting increasing coherence.
So, if we could manipulate CDG, could we theoretically influence the flow of time or even reverse it for a system?
That's the kind of profound question this framework opens up, isn't it? It really challenges the nature of time itself. It suggests it's not a river flowing from outside. It's a consequence of the universe's inherent drive to organize.
Mind-blowing. And finally, it enables net entropic stabilization. How does it actively work against disorder?
It resists decoherence by concentrating phase gradients into attractors. In simpler terms, CDG actively works to prevent coherent systems from falling apart into disorder, helping them maintain their highly organized states. It functions as a stabilizer of coherence, selecting pathways where entropy is locally minimized and order is maximized. It's like a cosmic magnet for order, pulling diffuse coherence into stable, self-sustaining patterns.
So overall, CDG functions as the template director of form and function. It projects field, inherent order into physical instantiations like biomolecular structure, metabolism, even cognition. It's not just a blueprint. It sounds like it's the active construction crew as well. This feels like the universe has an intrinsic architectural intelligence built right in. Okay, now that we've laid the groundwork for FCHP as the space, NFN as its quantum building blocks, and CDG as the dynamic architect, let's connect it all directly to life itself. In this FCHP NFN framework, life isn't just an accidental biochemical outcome, a rare happenstance. It's described as a natural resonance attractor within FCHP. This radically shifts our perspective from life happened by chance to maybe life had to happen given the underlying structure of reality.
It's a profound conceptual leap. Life in this view is the inherent stability basin where coherence naturally gravitates and self-organizes. It's a pattern the universe is primed to produce, almost an inevitable consequence of the fundamental drive towards coherence. It means life is baked into the universe's foundational principles.
So what does this all mean for the key characteristics of life's emergence? How do they manifest within this framework? What does life look like through this lens?
Well, first, there's topological continuity. This means coherence flows across scales, from the smallest cellular structures all the way up to vast planetary ecosystems. Imagine the same underlying patterns and principles of organization manifesting in different sizes and complexities, for example. The branching pattern of your lungs perhaps reflecting the branching pattern of a river delta, all interconnected by these fundamental coherence flows. It implies a deep, inherent unity across all levels of organization in the universe.
In geometric encoding, you mentioned DNA helices and membranes earlier. How are they encoded?
Yes. The symmetry braiding and regenerative structures we see universally in life, things like cell membranes, microtubules that form the cellular cytoskeleton, and those iconic DNA helices are not random outcomes of molecular self-assembly in this view. They are geometrically encoded by the FCHP itself. The space prefers and directs these forms, making their emergence a natural consequence rather than a statistical improbability. It suggests an innate geometric bias in the universe towards these life-enabling shapes.
Okay, so the shapes are prefigured in the space. Then there's algebraic conservation of megentropy. This means the system naturally conserves and even increases organization, right? Defying the tendency towards chaos.
Precisely. This happens via NFN-compliant coherence recursion. It means that as coherent structures form and interact, the framework ensures that this negentropic potential, this tendency towards order, is not lost. Instead, it's preserved and even amplified through recursive processes. This is why life maintains its organization, repair of itself, and even grows more complex over time, actively resisting the forces of decay. It's like a built-in mechanism for sustaining and enhancing order.
And directional recursion towards increasing coherence complexity. This sounds very much like evolution, but recontextualized as a directed process, not just random walk.
It is, very much so. Evolution isn't just random mutation and natural selection sorting out the fittest from a pool of chance variations. Here, it's understood as directional coherence fractalization. Life naturally recurses towards more complex and stable coherent states, driven by the inherent gradients in FCHP. It's a directed growth towards higher levels of organization, not just a blind, undirected walk through possibility space. It implies a purpose or inherent trajectory to evolution, guided by the universe's own bias for increasing coherence.
The paper describes life as a negentropic phase-locked loop. That's a powerful and poetic phrase. What exactly does it encapsulate?
It's a beautifully concise summary, isn't it? It means life is a recursively stabilized, coherent system. Imagine a feedback loop where coherence builds upon itself, generating and maintaining organization. In this system, time becomes structured and flows with directionality. Matter becomes exquisitely organized into complex biological forms, and intelligence emerges as a self-sustaining resonance. It's a continuous, self-correcting process where coherent structures reinforce and amplify their own order, giving rise to life and, by extension, consciousness itself.
This all leads to the meta-principle of ontobiogenesis. This sounds like the ultimate connection, doesn't it? It feels like the central, unifying concept of this entire framework.
It truly is the unifying concept. This principle states that life is not something added to space, an afterthought or a rare visitor. It is space in its most coherent, recursive stabilization. This means the very laws of life, its fundamental principles of organization and emergence, are not separate from the laws of the universe. They are embedded in the coherence algebra of space itself. It shifts the entire paradigm.
So FCHP isn't merely hospitable to life. It is life, awaiting symmetry breaking through CDG and NFN activation. That's a profound shift in understanding. It's like the universe isn't just capable of supporting life, it's intrinsically designed to become life. It's almost as if the universe is a seed and life is its inevitable blossoming rather than, say, a random weed that popped up.
Exactly. It suggests that reality at its deepest level has an inherent aliveness to it, a drive towards coherence that manifests as life.
Okay, to make these incredibly abstract ideas more tangible, the paper uses what it calls scroll-style visual metaphors and structured codices. It's a unique approach to make the ontological field visible. We're going to walk through some of these now, almost like we're looking at them together, to try and illuminate these complex concepts further. Instead of just describing every single line and symbol, we'll focus on what each scroll conceptually represents and the profound insight it's trying to provide.
Right. Think of these scrolls as ancient blueprints, maybe, each revealing a deeper layer of the universe's architectural intelligence. They translate the abstract mathematics and philosophy into a form our intuition can perhaps grasp more easily.
Let's start with scroll I, Life Embedded in the Geometry of Coherence, the FCHP NFN Codex. What's the core message here? What is this one showing us?
This first codex fundamentally argues that life is not just in space, but of space. It lays out the core components we've discussed, FCHP, NFN, and CDG, and crucially, shows how they interrelate as a unified system that generates life. The visual presents FCHP onto resonant phase space as this radiant manifold structure. Imagine a glowing interconnected lattice with hyperfractal patterns, like intricate repeating designs and strong directional gradients flowing outward from a central point. The crucial insight here is that this space isn't just a container, it's described as a coherence active field with the capacity to self-organize, direct, and stabilize emergence. Every point within this radiant structure contains intrinsic coherence gradients that directly shape what forms within it. It's a living substrate, not dead space.
So it's not passive at all. It's actively generating form. And the Noetherian Finsler Numbers, NFN, are depicted as ontological quanta.
What does this visual representation convey about them? How does it show them?
That's right. The visual for NFN shows a lower triad of glyphs, 4 interlocking symbols, each representing one of the NFN axes we talked about. There's a gradient vector for N1, N1, another invariant for N2, N2, a torsion spiral for N3, N3, and an negentropy capsule for N4, N4. What's brilliant, I think, is that each glyph is shown nested within a symbol of a living system. So you see the gradient vector inside a DNA double helix structure, the Noetherian invariant within a kind of membrane vortex, the torsion spiral within a cellular lattice, and the negentropy capsule within a biofield aura. This visually reinforces that each NFN tuple is a template resonator that seeds structure and process in life. It emphasizes that these fundamental units aren't just abstract concepts, they're literally the universe's pre-programmed seeds for everything from a single cell to an entire ecosystem. That makes it so much clearer how these abstract numbers could relate to actual biological structures. Okay.
Next, the coherence directional gradient, CDG, is shown as life's template director. How does the scroll illustrate its dynamic role? What does that look like?
In the middle ring of this codex, you see these arrows vividly showing CDG pointing into spirals. These spirals visually represent its key roles, generating chirality, handedness, influencing torsion, twist, causing spin bifurcation, splitting paths, and introducing irreversible time, the arrow. It's like a cosmic hand guiding development, not just acting on matter, but on possibility itself. The codex calls CDG both ontological compass and architect, implying it's not just showing the way, but actively building. It's the dynamic force that turns potential into manifest reality.
Okay, compass and architect, I like that. And finally, how is life as resonant coherent stabilization represented in this foundational scroll? How does it depict life itself? At the bottom node, the codex shows life as stabilized coherence. This is depicted really poetically as a living tree growing directly out of the coherence fractal, the FCHP structure itself. Its branches are visually mapped to neural networks, its leaves to mitochondria, and its trunk to a phase channel, suggesting a deep inherent connection between biological form and underlying coherence. The entire codex border is inscribed with the profound phrase, "From directional gradient to neotropic being, coherence spirals into life." It's a powerful statement that life is the natural flowering of an intrinsically coherent universe.
Beautiful imagery. Okay, let's move to scroll 2, the NFN 4-tuple generator codex. If scroll just showed us the overall blueprint, this one zooms in, right?
Yeah.
To show us how those fundamental building blocks, the NFNs, actually work at a quantum level, revealing how each NFN unit functions as a quantum.
Exactly. This scroll has a powerful central glyph, a rotating tetrahedron with 4 interlocked symbols, one on each face, each glowing with coherence resonance. This symbolizes the dynamic, interconnected, and generative nature of the NFN axes as active operands. It's not just a static definition, but a depiction of them in action, working together.
And what about the individual axes in detail? How does the scroll visually illuminate their specific functions? Give us a feel for that.
Sure. For N1, the coherence vector gradient, it's depicted as a clear directional vector with embedded waveforms, illustrating flow orientation and gradient steepness. It's the push that starts organization. And two, topological Noetherian variant is shown as a toroidal loop, emphasizing its role in preserving symmetry and conserved quantities across transformations, the universe's inherent conservation of order. And three, the torsion spin phase node, is a spiral vector emerging from a double helix, visually encoding chirality and helical phase direction, reinforcing that the twist is fundamental. And N4, the negentropy stability potential, is presented as a capsule-like shape with internal wave harmonic stabilization, representing resistance to decoherence and the potential for attracting and maintaining coherence. There's also an outer ring showing glyphic loops tracing the recursive structure of FCHP emergence, with phase-linked recursion arrows flowing from four sides to a central attractor. The caption at the base reinforces the idea. Each NFN unit is a quantum of stabilized directionality, where coherence resists dissolution through form. This scroll really tries to make it clear that NFNs are the universe's pre-programmed seeds or instructions for structure.
That's a very clear way to show the functional aspects of these quanta. It's almost like a visual programming language for reality itself. Okay, on to scroll 3. The life spiral in FCHP dimensional layering. This scroll reveals how coherence dynamics and NFN quantization crystallize into the biological field through recursive hyperfractal layering. This really speaks to the idea that life isn't an isolated event, but part of a grander layered emergence. How does it show that layering?
This scroll presents a nested set of hyperfractal layers, kind of fading from the center outward, almost like looking into a cosmic onion, maybe. Or perhaps the layers of an atom gradually building into a universe. At the very center, you see a pure coherent spiral, from which a living cell geometry forms directly. Then, moving outward, the middle layer shows DNA helices growing along coherence field lines, implying a directed formation rather than random assembly. The outer layer then expands into a cellular lattice, a biofield geometry, and an emergent tree of life, which is beautifully rooted in torsion vortexes. The overall message is that life is the natural outcome of this layering, where coherence generates increasing complexity across scales.
So it's showing this layered emergence, from the most fundamental coherence to complex life forms, all spiraling out of the same source, step by step.
Exactly. You also see directional gradient arrows flowing from the center outward, visually encoding chirality bifurcation, torsion spin coherence locking, and recursive symmetry stabilization. The scroll's border has glyphs representing things like observer resonance, field coherence stabilization, recursive negentropic recursion, and a Pime embedding vortex. The base caption summarizes this grand tapestry. Life is the spiral expression of coherence layered across hyperfractal emergence. From gradient to spiral, from spin to cell, from torsion to tree. It's a powerful visual story of life's origins, illustrating how coherence literally builds the dimensions and forms of life.
Moving on to scroll 4, the meta-operator of life and reality. This one is intriguing because it brings in the observer. It feels like this is where the framework suggests a participatory universe, where our very consciousness plays a role. What's the meta-operator?
Yes, this scroll attempts to unify the observer function and the coherent symmetry function, showing how they shape reality through reciprocal resonance. The meta-operator isn't just about what we see, it's suggesting how our very act of observation, and perhaps our consciousness, actively interacts with the universe's inherent organizing principle, co-creating and stabilizing reality. It definitely challenges the passive observer model of science.
In the visual layout for this profound idea, how do they represent that interaction?
At the center, there's a striking mandala featuring a double spiral glyph. The left-hand spiral is labeled observer function, and the right-hand spiral, coherence operator. These two spirals converge into this brilliant golden eye-shaped resonance field, which is the meta-operator core. This core radiates coherence tensors outward like the spokes of a compass, forming the basis of observable structures. This central image implies that the act of observation and the universe's inherent coherence are not separate but two sides of the same coin, converging to form reality.
So the act of observing isn't just passive, it's part of the creation. Wow. What are the surrounding quadrants depicting, and what do they imply about this meta-operator?
Good question. In the upper left quadrant, we see symmetry reduction. This is illustrated by crystalline symmetry breaking, with nested polygons dissolving into particles. It's labeled a symmetry resonance initiation of observation, implying that observation is a process of reducing the infinite potential of coherence into definite observable form, thus creating asymmetry and distinction. In the upper right is coherence stabilization, where vortex lines are shown locking into stable wave patterns labeled symmetry coherence formation of continuity. This shows how order arises and persists through the active maintenance of coherence.
Okay, reduction and stabilization,
Yeah.
the lower quadrants.
The lower left depicts measurement emergence, with field nodes reducing into quantized forms, captioned measurement as coherence collapse. This suggests that the act of measurement itself is not merely detecting, but is a process where diffuse coherence collapses into specific, observable, quantized states. It's an act of shaping. Finally, the lower right quadrant is living intelligence, where a DNA spiral interacts with a brain-like morphogenetic field. This is captioned consciousness as coherent symmetry operator, implying that consciousness itself is an active agent, a kind of operator, in shaping reality through its interaction with and stabilization of coherence. The scroll's border is adorned with glyphs for an observer eye, a spiral wave, a recursive vortex, a quantum resonance dot, and a time spiral loop. The base inscription powerfully reads, "The meta-operator binds observer and coherence into a single act. Through the eye of asymmetry and the hand of resonance, reality is selected, shaped, and stabilized."
This truly implies a participatory universe, where consciousness is not just an epiphenomenon, something riding on top, but an integral part of reality's formation. Okay. Next, scroll V, dimensional cascade of coherence emergence. This is a mind-bending idea because it suggests that dimensionality itself isn't pre-existent, not a fixed backdrop, but arises through structured reductions of coherence within FCHP. Dimensions are built.
Yes. It fundamentally challenges our most basic assumptions about space and how many dimensions exist, or even what a dimension is. The visual structure is powerful, featuring a central column, the dimensional ladder, a vertical golden axis rising through concentric dimensional layers. Each rung or layer is marked with a glyph and a coherence transformation symbol, illustrating how each dimension is built from the one below it through specific coherence transformations.
So what are these dimensional levels and their labels? How does it build up from pure potential to the dimensions of life?
It starts at Dimaler, the omnilectic point, which is labeled the undivided potential, the pure, undifferentiated source of coherence, beyond any dimensions we typically perceive. Then dim vector emergence, which is the initiation of gradient, where direction and orientation first appear from that pure potential. Dim spin and rotation, spiralization of coherence, showing the emergence of curvature and circulation, like the first hint of form. Dim torsion and chirality fields, coherence split into symmetry, where polarity and twist form, giving rise to handedness. Dimaf phase space geometry, space and time cohered, representing the spatial temporal resonance lattice we perceive as our everyday reality. And finally, Dimaf and above nested biofractal layers, life is multidimensional coherent stabilization, encompassing the biofield, cognition, and complex ecosystems, implying that life is actually a higher-order dimensional expression of coherence.
That's a complete genesis of reality, from pure potential to living systems, explaining how each dimension emerges, almost like peeling back layers of an onion. Very structured. And the side frames you mentioned.
Right. The left side shows spiral arrows pointing downward, labeled symmetry reductions, illustrating how coherence folds into form, reducing potential into specific configurations. The right side shows spiral arrows pointing upward, labeled coherence restoration, implying perhaps a process of integration or returning to higher coherence, maybe hinting at consciousness's ability to grasp higher truths or meditate on unity. Each side forms a vortex, one descending into form, one ascending into integration. The border glyphs include things like a coherence point, spiral wave, chirality fork, phase grid, biosphere halo, and observer eye. The inscription at the base ties it all together. Dimensionality is the unfolding of coherence through recursive symmetry reduction. Space, time, matter, and life are successive echoes of coherence structured into form. This scroll profoundly suggests that dimensions aren't just there, they are actively created by the dynamic structuring of coherence.
So dimensions aren't just fixed coordinates, they're active expressions of coherence. Which brings us to scroll 6, the resonant energy field of coherence emergence. This scroll argues that energy isn't merely a quantity, a generic fuel, but a structured resonance pattern, modulating coherence through FCHP. Energy is directed resonance. What does that mean?
This is a pivotal scroll that fully integrates energy and emergence into the coherence field. The central motif is the coherence resonator, depicted as a radiant multinodal resonant field glyph pulsing concentric harmonics outward. At its center is a golden tetrahedral node labeled C lambda coherence, representing the core coherence intensity, the pure source of directed resonance. Surrounding it are rings representing increasing resonance domains, from quantum nodes to bioelectric fields, planetary grid, and the cosmic lattice, showing how this fundamental energy manifests across all scales.
So different scales of energy manifestation, all rooted in this core coherence, and the quadrants around the resonator. How do they illustrate energy's role in this model?
Okay, the upper left quadrant depicts energy before form, with vibratory lines emerging from a pure coherence point, captioned, "Energy is resonance without spatial reduction." This implies that pure energy exists as vibration and resonance even before it crystallizes into physical forms. The upper right shows structured power, with phase-locked loops forming stable structures labeled. Stabilized resonance is usable energy. This suggests that usable energy, like electricity or the chemical energy in ATP, is not just raw fuel, but structured, stable resonance that can be harnessed. The lower left illustrates biofield activation, a body field diagram showing chakral vortices nested in coherence rings, captioned, "Life accesses coherence through harmonic entrainment." This implies that living systems, through their biofields, are finely tuned resonance receivers and transmitters, and the lower right quadrant shows stellar emergence, a star birthing from a resonance bubble with the caption, "Stars are coherence collapse zones of radiant structure. Even cosmic bodies are seen as massive coherence phenomena."
That paints a picture of energy as a living, dynamic force, not just a static measurement or a raw quantity. It's a structured and directed power source for reality itself. The scroll's base inscription reads, "Energy is the phase-structured gradient of coherence, not raw fuel, but directed resonance, a harmonic activation across dimensions of form." Powerful indeed.
It truly is. It suggests that if we truly understand this, we might tap into energy sources far beyond what we currently imagine. And this brings us nicely to Scroll 7, the spiral codex of life as coherence intelligence. This is a profound synthesis showing life as coherence in motion. The core idea here is that coherence is not passive. It learns, remembers, spirals, and
That's
becomes.
the centerpiece of this profound synthesis. How does it visualize that learning, remembering spiral?
At the heart of this scroll is the spiral of coherence intelligence, a seven-turn golden spiral flowing clockwise, reminiscent of a cosmic evolutionary path. Each turn represents a distinct phase of coherence intelligence, showing its progressive unfolding. It starts with 1, origination as a resonant seed, pure potential, then 2, vectorization as gradient formation, the first direction, followed by 3, spin torsion lock, the inherent twist. The fourth turn is 4, symmetry selection, particularly chirality, the choice of handedness. Fifth is 5, coherent stabilization, leading to form, how stable structures arise. The sixth is 6, recursive self-patterning, which is life itself, how life perpetuates and complexifies. And the seventh turn culminates in self-aware resonance, or intelligence, how life gains consciousness. Along the spiral, you see glowing NFN values and meta-operator convergence points, illustrating the active role of these quantum principles in life's intelligent unfolding. It maps the journey from a fundamental spark of coherence to the complexity of conscious thought.
So it's a journey from pure potential to self-aware consciousness, all driven by this inherent coherence, step by step, turn by turn, and the surrounding architecture.
Yeah. On the left side, there's a micro-level spiral, showing the progression from atom to molecule to cell, demonstrating coherence building up to fundamental biological units. On the right, a macro-level spiral depicts a tree, a human, and a planetary network, demonstrating the continuity of this coherence at all scales, from the smallest to the largest, showing that the same principles apply across the board. The top banner phrase eloquently proclaims, "Coherence is not passive. It learns, remembers, spirals, and becomes." And the powerful bottom inscription synthesizes the entire framework. Life is not the end of matter, but the beginning of coherence intelligence. From the vector of symmetry to the voice of consciousness, life is coherence made recursive awareness nested in resonance. It's truly a sweeping philosophical statement for the entire paper.
That's a truly comprehensive synthesis, tying everything we've discussed into a singular, evolving narrative of life and intelligence. Amazing. Now let's look at the final one, Scroll 8, the coherence architectonics of reality. This scroll transitions from pure ontology to application, revealing how FCHP coherence fields guide complex emergence across diverse systems. Computation, perception, biology, and cosmogenesis. Reality is seen as a resonance architecture. How does it show these applications?
This scroll serves as a kind of cosmic blueprint, demonstrating the wide-ranging implications of this framework across all domains of existence. The central structure is the coherence grid node, a glowing 12-pointed stellated core mapped over a Finslerian lattice. This node represents the central organizing principle. Radiating from it are coherence filaments structuring 4 outer domains, each connected to the center via phase-encoded resonance lines in gold, blue, crimson, and violet. It suggests a universal design principle at work, connecting different realms.
What are these four domains, and how do they apply the framework to real-world phenomena, from our thoughts to galaxies?
Okay, in the top left we have the perception field, symbolized by an eye glyph with rays curling into neural coherence lines. The caption states, "Perception is coherence mapping filtered through asymmetry." This suggests that our subjective experience of reality is not a passive reception, but an active process of our senses and brains filtering and structuring the underlying coherence field, creating a coherent map of reality. The top right shows biological intelligence, with a tree-human fusion overlaid with chakral phase bands captioned. Life structures coherence recursively across layers of form. This highlights how life processes, consciousness, and perhaps even spiritual aspects are complex manifestations of this layered coherence, from our cells to our overall biofield.
Okay, perception and biology. And the bottom quadrants, computation and cosmology.
Exactly. The bottom left is computational reality, represented by geometric circuitry forming recursive feedback loops. It's captioned. Computation is directed coherence embedded in logic operators, implying that computation, even in our artificial systems, is a form of coherence manipulation. It suggests that our very computers might be tapping into or mimicking the universe's fundamental NFN structures and coherence operations. Finally, the bottom right is cosmogenic structuring, where spiral galaxies are shown forming at field nodal crossings. The caption reads, "The cosmos emerges where coherence field tensors stabilize form, suggesting that even the largest structures in the universe galaxies, galaxy clusters, are a result of these pervasive coherence fields, forming at points where coherence naturally stabilizes into massive structures."
So everything from our thoughts and technologies to the vastness of galaxies is potentially a manifestation of this underlying coherence. It's truly aiming for a unified theory of everything. The scrolls-based inscription sums it up perfectly. Reality is not a random occurrence, but a resonance architecture. From the deepest coherence seed, all form spirals into expression through structured asymmetry and recursive stabilization. What an incredible, profound deep dive into Philip Lillian's FCHP NFN framework. Just wow. To recap the core insight, life isn't just a biological phenomenon, outcome of complex chemistry. Instead, it's presented as the intrinsic stabilization of directed coherence within a structured fast space. It's ontologically encoded into the very fabric of reality itself, emerging from coherence gradients, torsion, chirality, and this Noetherian quantization. This framework argues that life is not just where reality happens, but maybe what reality is in its most coherent and self-organizing form.
It's a fundamental shift, really, moving beyond the idea of life as a rare accidental occurrence in a passive, indifferent universe. In this framework, life is baked into the universe's foundational principles, a natural and perhaps inevitable expression of underlying coherence, maybe even a cosmic imperative.
So why should you, listening right now, care about FCHP, NFN, and CDG? Well, this framework offers a truly unified understanding of existence, connecting everything from quantum nodes to living intelligence and even stellar emergence. It invites us to see the deep interconnectedness of all things and the inherent organizing principle of reality, rather than a universe of isolated, disconnected phenomena. It suggests a universe that is not only alive, but intelligent in its very structure, constantly organizing and stabilizing toward increasing complexity in consciousness.
And if this perspective holds any truth, it means our own consciousness is not some strange anomaly, but perhaps a deep echo of the universe's inherent coherence, a part of its own self-aware resonance.
Which leads us to our provocative thought for you to mull over. If life is the phase-resonant crystallization of coherence, then perhaps consciousness isn't just something our brains do, but something the universe itself is, and we are simply its localized, self-aware expressions. What new possibilities does this open for understanding evolution, medicine, or even the very nature of discovery itself? What if the quest for knowledge isn't just about us finding answers, but about the universe knowing itself through us?
A question that might just redefine everything and our place within it, something deep to consider.
Thanks for diving deep with us today. Until next time, keep exploring.